Thank you all for coming. My name is Greg Bush with the Urban Environment League, and we have a forum this evening on Parcel B and trying to build some community consensus behind better waterfront, a subject that we've been dealing with off and on for years. I would like to start by this work.
Good evening, everyone. Well, I don't need this mic. Everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes. So welcome to the Miami Center for Architecture and Design. On behalf of the AIA Miami, I'd like to welcome for those of you who have not been to the center before, there's some very familiar faces here, people that are coming frequently. We've been open for about 3 months now. This is now April, so almost 4 months. We have an exhibit right now that's about the historic facades in the city of Miami, downtown specifically. If you look at the black lines on the floor, they represent the grid of the city, and then the gray lines represent the building footprints. Before you leave, if you haven't already had a chance to look at the exhibit, please feel free to do so. And again, welcome to the Miami Center for Architecture and Design. I'll leave this to my colleague over here.
Thank you. Okay, we want to thank our partners, including the Downtown Bay Forum. There's several gentlemen here.
Hello, everyone. This is one of the great events that we wanted to partner with because our founding president, and then Eisenberg, was present when these promises were made. And one of the things that always rankled her was that they were never kept. So it's a great honor for us to be able to do what we can to help this happen.
Thank you very much. In Miami Neighborhoods United, and the former president, Grace Solares, is in the audience. I want to thank Cheryl Jacobs and Fernand for helping us, and Juan Cuba for your sound. I guess I don't really need to do all that. And then I'd like to have special thanks to UEA board members, Albert Reuter, Ernie Martin, John De Lazara, and Jenna Val for their help with all of this. We're going to be talking about the waterfront this evening, and I'm going to be presenting a hopefully fairly quick, go through a lot of pictures to show you some of the history of the waterfront, a little bit of background. And then we'll talk to our panelists, one of whom was caught in New York and a plane didn't take off. Unfortunately, Spencer Crowley will not be with us tonight, but we have Elizabeth Plater-Zyber from the UM School of Architecture, standing right there. Grace Solares again. Javier Betancourt, Deputy Director, I think it is, if I recall correctly, of the Downtown Development Authority. And then I believe County Commissioner Audrey Edmondson will be coming by to make some comments, and at the end we'll be hearing from Matthew Lewis with some ideas of a plan for Parcel B. I'd like to start, most people are not aware of this. Back in the early 20th century, in 1896, when Miami was formed, on the plaque that was done, it said park on the water. And then, in the evening of December 11th, 1902, Judge George Worley came home late at night and saw that the FEC Railroad, the Flagler Railroad, put up a long fence along the waterfront. He was furious because he was used to looking at the water himself. So what he did, a student of mine did some research along this line, because he went to Budge's hardware store, bought some wire cutters, and cut the fence from 10th to 12th Street in fury. FEC, within a day or two, replaced it, and then Worley did it again. He did it 2 more times until the FEC got an injunction against him, and then he cut it again on the 21st of January, arrested, and it went to the state court through various procedures, and eventually he won. And without reading all this, it said, "We hold that the strip was and is dedicated as a public park." So the struggle for Miami's waterfront goes way back, basically what I'm trying to restore to you. And other cities, like Chicago, have come to the conclusion long time ago, when they had 3,200 people in 1835, that their waterfront should be forever open, clear, and free of any buildings or other obstructions. If you go to Chicago by and large, you see that still in place. Other cities are doing very exciting things with their waterfronts. And they're an example in many ways for Miami, it seems to me. Slow and fast. So this is the focus area that we're going to be looking at, as I assume a lot of you know, Bicentennial Park, American Airlines Arena, Parcel B, Bayfront Park. This is what we're going to be looking at in general. And this is, thanks to Spencer Crowley, some photographs of the area that's particularly under review, Parcel B. And I think the photographs speak for themselves, because not many people go there these days. Not many people can go there. There's another one. It's not exactly inviting, to say the least. So, I'm going to talk just a little bit about kind of the state of Miami's waterfront. We're going to have the panelists make some comments after I speak, and then hear from you all near the end. What about the state of Miami's waterfront today? There's an incomplete bay walk. There's no skywalk or bridge. There's all sorts of connectivity problems. I don't want to spend too much time here, but Bicentennial Park is not really a park at this point. There's an illegal Epic sales office. It's been illegal since 2011 along the river. The disgraceful condition, as many have noted, of the Miami Circle. I don't want to go into that right now, but that's a long subject. And there's a so-called compromised archaeological site at Met Square that can be controversial. I don't want to go into that either. And there was a Virginia Key Planning Oversight Board that was never created, as agreed to in the 2010 master plan. So we have questions to address over the next number of months about skyrise, about Parcel B and David Beckham's soccer stadium in Port. My view, in many respects, is that we have in many ways become a culture of endless disposable spectacles, easily dazzled by dreamy pictures of color, height, and light. I think we've experienced this in the past there too. It's kind of, they seem to repeat themselves in certain respects from my perspective. What deeper problems are there to consider? It seems to me that we have a very weak public memory or organizational oversight of our public waterfront. Advocacy groups in general haven't been there enough. So there's a lot of public confusion, even over who has jurisdiction in different places. We lack public planning initiatives to integrate the entire waterfront. Miami River Commission, in one sense, is a conspicuous exception to that. The news media, I would argue, has been an inadequate watchdog. A lack of attention by public officials in many instances, always saying their budget woes there, which in some instances, of course, are true. The news is obsessed with crime and celebrities and the latest fads, and our public land in many ways is going away. And defining public uses seldom seen as compelling as the next big commercial thing. So, having said that, and having some experience looking at, probably some of you have at places like the High Line in New York, and Millennium Park in Chicago, there are a lot of other places that are doing exciting things. We need to rethink a lot of our public places in terms of human scale, connectivity, having having more shaded walkways and bikeways rather than just endless parking areas. Miami is a global city, but we have among the least park space per capita for any high-density city in the nation. And where's the money for a lot of it? There's supposed to be a lot more impact fees to buying new parkland that somehow haven't appeared in as large amounts as we would like. I'd like to go through very quickly some of the background to this. Going back to the early days with the Native Americans, as a lot of you, some of you probably know a lot of this, but there was a slave plantation at the mouth of the Minor River in the 1830s, 1840s. Fort Dallas was built there in the 1830s, eventually moved from the mouth of the river to Lummis Park, where it sits today. It was rebuilt in 1925 by the Daughters of the American Revolution. That's a shot 1870s at the mouth of the Miami River. Give you a little bit of perspective on your earlier drawings. Looking southward at the Brickell Trading Post, probably the 1870s, 1880s. This is a gorgeous shot by Ralph Middleton Monroe of the mouth of the Miami River, roughly 1884. Need a little perspective. And of course, everything changed on 1896 when Flagler made a deal with Julia Tuttle, brought the railroad down, and created the Royal Palm Hotel in yellow in the bottom. There are shots of the mouth of the Miami River back there. The gardens, for example, of the Royal Palm Hotel. Gee, that's where that museum is. No comment. William Jennings Bryan, the Democratic and Populist Party presidential candidate, came to Miami, lived here from 1950 until his death, and in the mid-1920s he used to give Bible sermons in Royal Palm Park. You see the hotel in the background, thousands of people, one of the more prominent residents back then. These are some shots of the McAllister Hotel and so-called Elser Pier out into the water. Here's another shot, the first skyscraper in Miami. That existed, it was the largest recreational pier in the southeast from 1917 to 1924 when it was torn down. Here's another shot from 1920. And then, of course, in the mid-1920s, Miami created Bayfront Park, Phil. There we have a shot looking north in what became essentially the industrial waterfront of Miami by 1925. As Tim Schmann, who's here, knows, there's a rock garden that was completed in 1927 in Bayfront Park. And then other things happened, such as the hurricane. Ship went down earlier that year called the Prince Valdemar that disrupted traffic in the whole Bayfront. In 1926, major concerts took place in Bayfront Park over the years, and World War II PT boats came in there, an auditorium was built in the park, so we're talking about a lot of building going on, a lot of changes in that park in particular. There was a public outcry against destroying the band shell in 1947. And yet it was destroyed. There was another one built, so they seem to come and go. This is an interesting quote, it seems to me, from doing research I've done on Virginia Key Beach and the history of that. John Pennekamp, the editor of the Miami Herald, is worth reading, I think. Virginia Key, he said, but one could argue that it's more generalized. It's pretty much like a habitual imbiber's headache. It's sure to pop up every so often. The county has a far tougher policy of disposing of public lands than does the city, which is regarded as fair game at any time. Financially harassed, the city always is ready to listen to the voice that promises money. Next to the sun, the waters of the ocean and the bay are the greatest assets we have. In fact, they are inseparable in evaluating the area's primary worth. The people's right to see and enjoy their waters certainly transcends that of any developer who, lacking a civic consciousness and pride, would ride roughshod to his purpose. There was a library created in 1951 for $1 million, destroyed in 1980. There's probably a lot of you know. There was this amazed me, and there's some research in the late 1940s, serious proposals by a parking lot company to get rid of Bayfront Park and make it a parking lot, and then build another park out of the bay. Luckily, in one sense, that went away. But I suppose it raises the question that it has to me, do we have an endlessly replaceable sense of place? That's another question. Pier 5, some of you may remember, was a major attraction over many years, looking south from the Miami Herald building that was created in 1960, 1961. Port of Miami, of course, was created in the early 1960s. That's a contemporary shot. So what happened ultimately was the industrial waterfront changed, moved. It was happening in a lot of cities around the country. Festival marketplaces, new tourist attractions, residents overlooking the water, replaced a lot of older rotting docks. So our experience was not unique. You can see from a couple shots coming up here next to Harvard Park's collection what that area looked like years ago. So, by the 1970s, in particular and 80s, there was a push for waterfront parks. But what is a modern park? Event space for concerts, restaurants, shops, sports fields, elaborate designs, place of natural beauty, trees, water features, etc. Much of the area north of Bayside still remains unused. But if you look back at a lot of the plans in Miami, it's pretty astounding. This is the Doxiades plan from 1967 that never basically went anywhere. There was huge fights over that. Maurice Ferre is actually going to be here shortly, I think. Was quite a visionary thinker about the waterfront. Helped purchase portions of the Ball property at the mouth of the river, and did a quick taking from Ed Ball of some FEC land, including Parcel B, to be used for a park, and was behind the sponsorship for Bicentennial Park. That was one of the visions for Ed Stone and Associates for what the area would look like. It didn't exactly come to pass. But Bicentennial Park did get created and opened in 1976, as a lot of you probably know, with large berms that hid the park from the street that made it pretty unfriendly in many respects for passengers and ultimately unsafe. So the city had purchased 23 acres of FEC land, bought with this park bond money, and yet the park was never really developed as a park. As a lot of you know, guess what happened? I have this right. There were all sorts of other things that happened. For example, somewhat later, the Pepper Fountain was created. It cost $4 million, was never really run correctly because it cost, I think the figure is $400,000 a year to run it. The motors didn't work, etc. Kind of embarrassing. And then you did have, as times changed, champions, like some of you may well remember Dan Paul passed away a couple years ago. He was kind of a lone wolf advocate for parks, getting the Dan Paul amendment with a 50-foot mandatory setback passed. But what happened to Bicentennial Park? There was violence in the park almost immediately after it opened. The City Commission endorsed a maritime museum. Didn't happen. There was supposed to be pedestrian overpass. There was money actually from Miami Herald that went into a fund. That didn't happen. Then Miami-Dade Community College had a 5-year lease for the ball fields in the park. That ran out for a whole bunch of very complex reasons. But what did happen, of course, was in 1982, the city and Miami Motorsports created, with Ralph Sanchez, the Miami Grand Prix that went through large parts of that park. Bicentennial Park and the FEC track. That's what happened in the park. And then when Sanchez's operation went bankrupt and then reopened again in Homestead, he was required to put the park back to green. Did not happen. So it was left that way for a long time. Bayside agreement took place in 1985. Without going into the detail of that, where there was supposed to be roughly 7% of the profits to go to buy other waterfront land. Not sure what happened to that money. Bicentennial Park essentially became a haven, it should be a haven, for the homeless. The Herald in Tome in 1992, Bicentennial Park has failed from the outset. It's a victim of poor design, constructed access, nearby urban blight, and the unconscionable neglect by the city of Miami. Then in 1996, as a lot of you probably are aware, there was a referendum in relation to the arena. And this was only, what, 11 years after the Miami arena was constructed, a few blocks further west. Without going into the details here, that referendum, at the heart of it, this is what I find particularly interesting, was a promotional strategy for the arena. You can see this in the Sports Business Journal, January 2004. Miami Herald poll showed that 60% of Dade County voters were opposed to the new Heat arena being built along the waterfront. We found, Michael Murphy, PR agent, said, that to win we had to make the referendum about more than basketball. Polling at the community showed Cuban Americans saw the arena as a symbol of pride and local achievement. African Americans saw an economic project bringing new jobs and had pride in the local NBA team. White voters were most excited about a new family-friendly park on Miami's waterfront, including a soccer fields and a new arena, which would bring in concerts and other entertainment events. Recasting the arena as a waterfront park and arena was to be the key to our campaign. We featured Coach Riley prominently in political campaign-style TV ads to deliver our message that Miami was a world-class city that deserved a world-class waterfront park and arena. And that was one of the ads for this very famous kind of soccer field that was promised to people at the time in 1996. And there are two strange people who wrote an editorial right before the election in which we said, in part, great cities are pedestrian cities with open spaces, engaging forums for public dialogue and conscious design for human-scale structures. Why should we give up scarce public waterfront just because public authorities designed the park poorly and have not adequately managed it? 18 years ago, anyway. Preserving waterfront green space had been a central election issue by county mayoral candidate Alex Pinellas in his winning 1996 campaign. Advertisement for him said, quoting in part, "The only candidate for mayor was voted against using public money to build a new downtown arena for the Miami Heat," was Alex Pinellas. After his victory, he reversed course, as most of you know, and made a slightly more favorable deal with the Heat. He spent something like $3.5 million and won the referendum. Bottom line. So that's kind of what it looked like for, say, maybe picture. And there's a shot, a little out of focus, of course, of ideas of what would be going into the site in 1997, 1998. Different small buildings and some little parkland around it. Most of that never happened. I'm not going to go into a lot of the detail here because I want to move on and get to the discussion. But the city did deed a number of acres to the county. Then the county and the port, as some of you know, you may remember this too, tried to take over Bicentennial Park to put some more slips in again. And yet they got caught with a lot of bad spending, let's put it that way, and that scheme essentially fell apart. It goes on, and I don't want to go too far away from this site, but by 1999, the Miami Circle became a central issue. Virginia Key Beach Park was a key issue. The Urban Environment League and others to try to save that from development. Marine Stadium. There were all these patterns, in other words, of intentional neglect, demolition, if you will, by neglect, that were taking place by this time, right before John Henry and the Marlins sought Bicentennial Park, of course, for a new stadium. So a number of us got together and created a Bicentennial Park Waterfront Renewal Committee. We had all these design workshops to try to bring some life to it. And in the long run, 2 museums, as you well know, were granted 4 acres each in the park with a 2004 bond issue that helped to pay for them. We won't even go into this. This is some of that's what the plan looked like. No, I'll take that back. Hold on. This is what John Henry sent me one night late, really angry after we accused him of stealing public park. He said, "Mr. Bush, publicly in writing, accusing me of stealing Bicentennial Park from Miami continues to convince me of what a fraud you are. Shame on you for your lack of decency." Whatever. Anyway, by 2004, the Bayfront Park Trust, in association with the Project for Public Spaces, had a design workshop for the Bayfront, in particular focusing in part on Parcel B. And participants listed a wide range of amenities. This is what could happen again, something like this. Tropical foliage, water features and fountains, seating, both fixed benches and movable with small tables, police presence, wiring the park for internet access, introduced misting stations to cool patrons as they stroll along the Baywalk, real beach, dunes, beach chairs, etc. Among the most more interesting recommendations for Parcel B in 2004, the county should do a master plan for Parcel B, and that a county should develop maybe a stop for water taxi system around the area. There was no central follow-up to these recommendations, unfortunately. Developer Armando Medina by Parcel B appeared for a period of time around 2003 under President Nancy Liebman of the UEL. We dissuaded him from wanting to put up a 23-story condo apartment complex there. Then a Bay of Pigs Museum was proposed in 2007. The Urban Environment League did not oppose creating the museum, but sought to persuade advocates to look at other sites. Current uses, Parcel B, I'm trying to wrap up as quickly as I can. Rentable space, not through the County Parks Department, interestingly, but the Internal Services Division. It's become a staging area, overflow parking site for the heat events, Volvo Ocean races, but it's still, by and large, quite forlorn. There is a proposal for a Cuban Exile Museum, History Museum, that has been moved a little bit into the County Commission. But it's estimated to cost about $60 million, which is hard to raise, to say the least. Who would pay for that? And the question that a lot of people ask are there not other suitable sites for that? Perhaps like History Miami, which has additional space for the Miami Art Museum, the Cultural Plaza. The heat needs more parking. There are questions these days about the renewal of the heat lease years earlier than specified. Yet, one can ask under what terms for public benefit. There's clearly a need for more open space for neighbors. We've expressed that to Commissioner Edmondson and others. Yet, how do we factor the cost of design and maintenance into all of this to make it an attraction? So, the reality is that Parcel B is a forlorn place with a lack of public use, but it does not have to be that way. It could be something much better. Spencer Crowley, who can't be here tonight because of claim, showed me a letter that he wrote in 2010 of Florida Inland Navigation District, which has some money, to say the least. Our respective constituents are unable to enjoy the vastly improved shorelines. So, how can we move forward? This is what I'd like to put up as a little proposal for the time being. That political leadership needs to come from the county administration, which by and large controls this site, Zone City Park, behind a kind of transparent planning process to oversee and enhance Parcel B and other waterfront locations. There apparently is going to be some kind of commission action on Parcel B in May. I would argue that there should be some kind of a waterfront oversight committee to help define and bird dog the overall process, including residents and architects, city county officials, and others, with regular tracking of the political process. I think that there should be delegations to meet with the Heat to explore the future of the park, naming, design opportunities, and parameters of their future lease for the public benefit, on cooperation in redesigning it. So I thank you very much for your attention. And we're going to try to keep the UEL website up to date so that people can get new information as time goes on. And perhaps down the line we'll build some kind of consensus for a wonderful waterfront park. That's somebody who's just joined us is Maurice Ferret.
Yeah,
No.
that's Parcel B.
That's what we're going to get
Parcel
to.
B with a
Matt Lewis is here, and he has some ideas that I think will be interesting for us at this point to consider before we have our discussion.
Hello everybody, my name is Matthew Lewis. I am principal at Lewis & Nielsen. We're a landscape architecture firm based here in Miami. We had some friends on the board ask us just a couple days ago to look at some studies for what the potential of this park could be. So we scrambled over the past few days, all in fun and good spirits, of course, to look at potentials for what this site has and how this site could really tie the whole waterfront experience and park experience together. And some of the things that we looked at was, when looking at a site like this, it's not really just about the site, it's about the connection to the perimeters and the roadways and pathways and circulation around the space. And as we delved into the site specifically, we actually zoom back out of the site specifically to look at the different connections around the city. And as my professor in school would say, that we've got so many of these different elements, whether it's PAM, whether it's Bayside, Bayfront Park, and extending up and down the coastline. He referred to these things as pearls. And these pearls are great and they're valuable in their own, but if you can somehow tie these elements together into a pearl necklace, examples you can see in like the High Line in New York or the Riverwalk in Boston and places like that, I think we really have the potential to do something unique here. And this site almost acts as the clasp to that pearl necklace, because it truly is the epicenter of not only the city, but what's happening north and what's happening south of our site. And some of the problems that we see right now, and I'm from Ohio originally, but I've been here for 15 years, and I work in Wynwood, I live in Brickell, and so my life really extends just to the north and just to the south of this site, and I run it in the mornings, I ride my bike to work, I drive it, I go to the museum, I feel that I'm very much a part of this thing, very much a part of this site, and some of the bigger problems that we have is just the disconnection between our site and the north and the south. For example, if you were at Bayside, in order to get back over to the arena, you have to cross 5 or 6 different curb cuts just to get to the arena. And same thing coming from Pam, coming back around. You've got some interfaces with vehiculars that prevent a nice pedestrian experience. And we think that simply by creating that necklace string that kind of comes through, that ties Bayside and the park together and moves under the highway here, connects through the site and then onto the PAM, that it's simple in the end. It's not complicated, but we all know it is. And our biggest task right now was looking at simplifying circulation. How do we eliminate the vehicle from this sort of experience? Not just the roadways that are to the north and south, but we also have other roadways that separate the arena from the park space itself. And one of the big concepts that we have was that north-south connection, which is easy, but we also thought about ramping up and tying into that plaza, so you get the experience of interfacing with the marina and sloping down gracefully into this park. In the next slide, let me go. I'm going to skip this one to the next slide. Sorry. So here we are, just looking at potentially what this park could be. And Greg alluded to it earlier. What is a modern park? It's a mix of different elements. It's passive, it's active. You need lots of shade, especially here in Miami. Whereas in places like New York, you want to have exposure to sun in the summertime. But here, it's the opposite. We'd like to get in as many big trees as possible, but again, like keeping the circulation as simple as possible from Bayside, making this movement up through the park, and then the connection over to Pan with potentially a bridge. Sorry, slides are moving. There we go. And again, but keeping the car out of the equation, eliminating this interface here with this direct connection underneath the waterway and into the park, eliminating this roadway by having that plaza fold down into the site. So now you get this easy movement up to the stadium for events and vice versa back down, and then clearly making that stronger move up to the Pan. Now, one of the things that a modern park brings is expense and maintenance, and and our goal here is to always use native trees and plants to not only to reinforce the environment, but to recreate or rehabilitate the ecosystem. And one of our thoughts in making this park truly special and being the epicenter of this park system through the city is thinking about how this could potentially be paid for. And one of those ideas was actually there's a parking garage that exists underneath the arena right here, which I think it's one level, maybe two. But one of our thoughts was to actually extend that parking into our site, but you would never know it was there. And we thought that we could get one level, which you see in this diagram, the purple represents one level parking with an additional second level to make this interface an easy, smooth transition from high down to low into the site. And just as we have this, this really nice retail through Bayfront, we thought we could continue that retail along the front here, and actually having the landscape kind of come up and over and creating a really interesting kind of covered outdoor seating area, so it can be used when it's raining out. It can be used when it's really hot and needs shade and that sort of thing. And so it's not, it's one thing looking at the money generation, but it's also what's happening here. I know Brad over at Grand Central, when he put in that skate park there, it was amazing to me going up and down Miami Avenue every day and seeing more and more people activating that by simply having a skate park. I mean, it was brilliant. And so we want to start to incorporate things like that, like a skate park, like a children's play area, like big swaths of lawn, so you can have soccer games. I wouldn't recommend having a big soccer field here because, I don't know, you can't put trees in the soccer field and it just doesn't look good. But if we could provide larger areas for those sorts of activities like frisbees or, baseball or soccer, small games, then we start to activate this, and at night it could be a concert venue, or you could have, movie night, or you could, when the heat's playing or something, you show the games against the screen, and people come down here for a reason. And even me living in Brickell or coming from work, as long as it's easy to get here, that's the key. And so the next slide, I just want to show, kind of alluding to some of those activities. I think there's a lot, even along the waterfront. Sorry, this isn't. There we go. Like I talked about, we can start to introduce skate parks. We can just start to do these kayak launches and these sort of things. It may cost money to build, but it's it's not a lot of maintenance over time. Just providing seating, I think we would want to get a lot more trees in this condition for shading, boat slips, just big open spaces of lawn and like I said, native planting, but it all talks about the connectivity of upper levels, of lower levels of crossing over, but again, being this park having the potential to be the heart of the city. Thank you.
You have a question, sir?
We're going to hold questions. We're going to hold questions till the end. Okay. I have a couple people to acknowledge. Maurice Ferre is here, and Ron Nelson and Commissioner Audrey Edmondson are here. Ron Nelson from Commissioner Sarnoff's office. Thank you all for coming. Maurice, would you like to join us up here?
Oh, at the right time? No, I don't have to join you, but I can say a word.
Fine. Well, we've heard a lot. Before getting to some questions, I have a couple myself.
Can we get some lights on here?
Pardon?
Can we get these lights on here?
Did you get those lights? I'd like to, I guess, ask the panel, maybe a fairly obvious question. I went over some of it, but from your perspective.
Thank you.
How did this precious piece of public space get ignored for so long as far as you're concerned? Any general comments? Starting with...
To me,
Yeah, maybe.
politics. To me, politics. It all boils down to all the time. I remember back in the 70s, when Kennedy was mayor, you were mayor, the Bicentennial Park was purchased with bonds. Athlete Range went out to the African American community and told them, please vote for those bonds. We're going to have a park right there for all those neighborhoods to the west, so you can have access to the water and come and play. And see what happened. What happened with Bicentennial Park? It was a disaster what they did. Now we have Museum Park. We have 2 huge buildings in there. This is not a place for people to go and have picnics and things like that. It's not, really. To the west, to the south rather, we'll have Bayfront Park. We have Bayside. We have a section of the Bayfront now that is used by the people who live on Brickell. When we did the arena negotiations, we had a profit sharing portion in that contract. They've been there for many years. They've never received one dime from that. So it all boils down to politics. But I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, that you're here today, take this piece of land very seriously. This is the last piece of waterfront property that we, the people, must enjoy. We cannot have another building there. We just can't. We can't afford to do that. So I ask you, please, now that you're here, you may not be active in politics, but when you see that something that is not for the public use to go in that section, please have your voices heard. Our waterfront has been taken from us, and all is because of politics. Mr. Mayor.
I agree.
Thank you.
Liz, could I ask you, at the next question that we had in the list that we gave you, what other models around the country or the world do you look to in terms of planning process for a park like this that you've noticed?
Well, actually, I think you showed several of them when you showed Chicago and Battery City Park. And there are many more, I think, throughout the world. waterfronts are being revisited and improved as people spaces, many of them industrial waterfronts originally, whether it's Barcelona or, I mean, you name it. And I think your history was really great. It makes you think that we are a city with a great fear of success. It's like someone with a personality disorder. Because we're always waiting for the next shoe to fall or the next proposal to be made that we have to oppose instead of support. And so I think really what you're talking about is how do you make something happen, and then how do you make sure it keeps happening well? There are a lot of complaints about the things that didn't happen that were promised, and I think it comes down to an administration, a new kind of administration for it, because there really is none at this point. And so I would, first of all, point out that it's part of the bigger picture, and I think there are a few of these still to give away, which looks at the whole public waterfront in Miami River and Bayfront as a kind of unified place, unified public place. We may not have great squares and plazas the way historic cities in other parts of the world do that we admire and love to visit, but we do have this water's edge, and it's 17 miles of it. So that is quite extensive. That means everybody in the city or even the county can get to it. It's truly public. Because it spreads out. And so I think you have to think in terms of how do you make it happen? It's not all in place. And then how do you make sure that it's maintained and that people are safe on it and that it's kept clean and safe and so on. And I think that probably needs some kind of special administrative body. So I would suggest, now this is bringing up a little bit of the history, when we did the plan for Bayfront Park, I think we began to look at something like an independent parks organization. I believe Chicago has that. It's a special taxing authority. It's like our water management district. It's completely run, it's like a parking authority, right, which somebody wisely made separate from other aspects of government many years ago, and maybe we need to do that again for this. Oh, Ron's shaking his head no. But at if that's not it, we certainly need to decide what it should be. And maybe this slot, part of it is the dual jurisdiction. It's a piece of county in the middle of the city. What do they care? It's just a land bank for the county, I presume. It's really hard to get county streets to change when they run through the city, so imagine how hard it might be to make something happen on a piece of county land in the city. That's part of the problem. Maybe there should be a trade, and the county should give this to the city, and the county gets something else, and then the city parks department is put in charge of our waterfront with a budget that goes along with it. But everybody's always afraid about how government pays or doesn't pay for things, or how it abuses its authority and its budgetary responsibility, and that's why I was thinking of the independent entity. It would be great if this was someplace that people would send their money. The university gets people to give them money to build buildings, to maintain the beautiful landscape. People feel that it'll be safe at the university if they give their millions of dollars. Why couldn't the public realm be likewise a recipient of public benefit over time, in which people would feel that by giving their money to the waterfront park, the waterfront parks, Miami's waterfront, that would enable a great place to grow and be wonderful for generations to come. And I think that's our challenge. How do we make the administration of these places something that people would trust and want to support?
Do you have any comments in terms of the DDA's perspective at this point, or your own?
Actually, if I could go back to your first question, I think the reason this hasn't been addressed for all these years is the timing wasn't right. I've maybe become more philosophical as I get a little older and have kids, but I think, there's a time when the stars align and things happen when they're meant to happen. The fact that nothing has happened here is actually a great thing. It presents you with an opportunity to do the right thing still, all these years later. And I think one of the things we needed, one of the stars we needed to align was having a residential population that, quite frankly, downtown hasn't had historically. Those residents are now there. They want parks, they want open space, they're advocates. And that's precisely, the government moves when the people demand something. We haven't had people demanding anything on this space for a number of years. And then, there are added complications, lack of resources during the recession when property values fell. A lot of people were distracted with other priority projects like Museum Park and trying to get that completed. But I think there's an amazing opportunity here. It's still available. And we have people who are now living in downtown who want this to happen. I think the capacity in this room is a testament to that. So, I'm very positive about what may happen here in the near future. But it's going to require folks like y'all in this room to demand it. Demand it passionately and consistently. You have to be tenacious about it. The politicians will follow the people when the people demand it. Sometimes. And if they don't, then you know what to do with them. I mean, that's good.
Greg, I take one. Good evening. How many, I'd like to see a show of hands, how many of you remember who Robert King High was? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8. Robert King High. 8 people, 9 people, 10, 11.
We have 11.
Okay.
12.
All right. So Robert King High was the mayor of Miami for 10 years. A lot of these things that you see happening started with Robert King High. Now, I just want to give you a little, I'm sorry I missed the presentation because I was driving from Orlando, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. I was up at the Florida Transportation Commission and FDOT's meeting on logistics and freight, but I'll come to that in a second. But let me talk about a little history. When I was a county commissioner, I asked Liz to help me on a plan. She got her students to take a plan to see what they would do with all this land. They proposed housing. You remember? They came back with a proposal for housing. So we've had all kinds of different plans, and I'll send you a copy of it. And of course it was the students, I understand, that did that. We also got MIT involved and all that. But going back to Robert King High, here's what I wanted to share with you. Robert King High comes into office because of something called the Termite Commission. How many of you remember what the Termite Commission was? Does anybody remember? One. Two people remember the Termite Commission. If you don't know your history, you're going to repeat it. Remember? Somebody said that.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Now let me tell you about the Termite Commission. There was corruption. Big time corruption in Miami.
No.
And
No, say it ain't so.
And the Key Farmer Committee came down here to investigate all that. And Robert King High was the guy on the white horse. Okay? He's the guy that fought against the bad guys. And of course, that, just like now, the commission had 5 members. It was not an executive mayor like it is now. The mayor was the chair of the commission. And every vote, they used to call Robert King High the one-vote mayor. You know why? Because all the votes were going 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, every year after year. Now, Robert King High wanted to get rid of all these problems. And so then there was a fellow by the name of Charlie Crandon. How many of you remember who Charlie Crandon was? All right, there's 1, 4, 5, right? Charlie Crandon was the father, one of the fathers of this community. He was the guy that started something called Metropolitan-Dade County. Now, the guy that did the charter was a fellow by the name of Dan Paul. How many of you remember Dan Paul? There's more of you that remember Dan Paul. Okay, maybe 10 or 15. All right. So Dan Paul was fresh out of Harvard Law School, and he was retained to write the Metro Charter. So guess what happened? between Robert King High and the Metro Charter and all these things that were going along, the city of Miami made a major mistake. It started giving all its properties to the county. So it gave the airport to the county. It gave Jackson Memorial to the county. It gave the seaport to the county. It gave the water and sewer, that was Dave Kennedy, that was right before me. The last one of these pearls. And so, Miami, instead of going the way Chicago went, or Atlanta went, or Dallas, or San Francisco, which is a completely different world, went into the rabbit's hole. And the rabbit's hole was called Metropolitan-Dade County. And that rabbit's hole did wonderful things, but one of the things it did not do was build a core city. Here we are. That's the issue. So what does a modern American core city need? It basically needs, in my opinion, two basic things. One is transportation, and the other is parks. Okay, now one last thing that I want to share with you before I tell you about Orlando. What's our park? You know what our park is? Biscayne Bay. That's Miami's Central Park.
Amen.
That's Miami's jewel. Anything that abuts it, anything that looks to Biscayne Bay is what we have to save, protect, and defend at all costs. Okay, so, and I made some mistakes in the past. We all have. The kids at the University of Miami who wanted housing on those properties. made a mistake. But that's okay. Hey, you're right. Thank God nothing happened because we have that land available. Now, let me tell you about Orlando. So here are all these 100 people from all over Florida meeting. What are they chasing after? You said it's politics. Let me be a little bit cruder. It's money. It's not politics, it's money. Money is the road to politics. Or politics is the road to money. But that's what people are chasing. So follow the money. 100 people meeting in Orlando. Well, what are they talking about? Well, here comes the Panama Canal. Okay. The Panama Canal is going to open up all kinds of trade. Guess what? It's really not going to be that big of a thing for Miami. Why? Well, because there are a lot of other ports that compete with the Port of Miami with 50 feet. But let me tell you what's happening. Everybody in Tampa who has any kind of sense, Orlando, Jacksonville, all these places, they're chasing after the money. They think, oh my God, and you know, they're not chasing after the tail, they're chasing after the dog. You know what the dog is? It's not the Port of Miami. The port are the big boxes. The port is Amazon. That's the port. That's the dog. The dog is total. The dog is Costco. That's the dog. This is the tail. That's not the dog, that's the tail. And so they're chasing after where these big boxes are going to go, where the distribution centers are. And guess what? Behind the 100 people, there were another 100 people sitting in seats like this. And they're all there for that same reason. Guess how many people were there from Miami?
Zip.
2. One from the Port of Miami, not a high